Gotcha.
Every other time it's compensatory and punitive monetary damages.
Okay. Well, we are going to continue with our discussion today. Where we left off, I believe, was this discussion we were having about the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the fact that it was superseded by, where am I? The Civil Rights Act of 1991, which for the first time we could have punitive damages. So I sue my employer for discrimination because I was pregnant or Asian or a woman or disabled or gay or whatever, and I win, and they can prove that it was, and here's the word, that the discrimination was intentional. All of a sudden, the judge can not only give me my back wages for the differential what I should have earned, but they can, put $1 million in my pocket, or $10 million, or $100 million, right?
I was going to ask about that when I was researching it. It said there was a $300,000 federal cap.
I don't know. I've
It
never
said
heard that.
The state didn't
Okay.
have a cap.
Okay, so the federal has a cap, okay.
That's what I read. I didn't know that.
That makes sense. So different states probably have different limits. Okay, so, who did we decide was president in 1964? LBJ, right? And so then 67, they followed up with the ADEA, which is the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, and that basically added another class to those 5 classes we learned about in the Civil Rights Act, right? So this just, I don't know, I guess, this cut in the 64. The 64 Civil Rights Act, let's be honest, was primarily about race. And so you'll see in these subsequent Civil Rights Acts that other classes were added. And this is talks about age. And you can't use age to discriminate, hire, fire, or promoting. And it provides protection to workers over 40. There's a few key exceptions for things like safety. Like obviously you're not going to have an 80-year-old airplane pilot, right? For obvious reasons. So safety, and then folks that, I don't know the exact parameters, but that hold really high-level key executive positions in your organization, and it's sort of critical that for the health of the organization that you have people coming in and out that, maybe it's better to have younger people that are more visionary. Okay, then ADA was passed in 1993. So fast forward a bunch of years. Who was president in 93? Bill Clinton. And ADA prevents an employer from discriminating against a qualified person based upon his or her disability. And I will tell you, this one was a really huge can of worms. First off, has anybody ever seen any of the films of what the disabled community was doing to get this passed? I mean, they're in Washington, D.C., out on the mall, and they're all out of their chairs on the ground. I mean, the film is pretty heavy. The marches, so to speak, are pretty heavy from a visual impact perspective. And so the 2 really critical things. A, you can't discriminate against me if I'm a qualified person, i.e., I can perform essential functions of the job. And B, and this is the biggie, you've got to provide reasonable accommodation for me. So let me just paint a picture of reasonable accommodation. And I was actually CFO of a pharmaceutical company near this was passed, equine and bovine pharmaceutical company. And we had a wet lab where we had researchers, chemists, and microchemists, biochemists researching. And we had a young woman apply that was in a wheelchair. And they were all it was a wet lab, and you stood at your workstations. Okay? We were a firm of 18 people. We were a startup. My job was to go out on the road and get venture capital to keep the thing moving until we could get through the FDA and get the product to market. You put a whole bunch of money up front and then hope it hits. That's how pharmaceuticals work. And so I had to watch something called the burn rate. How much money did we spend a month, right? And this young woman came, and she was eminently qualified to be a biochemist with us, and it was going to require about a $40,000 renovation in our lab to elevate one of the, or to elevate her up to one of the workstations. Reasonable or not reasonable?
Not reasonable. 40
Why not?
grand, 40 grand, a lot of dough.
Okay, well, 40 grand, but if our product hit, we were gonna be making 40 million a year. But we have to go through the FDA process to get there.
Yes, that's a big hit. How much we
Reasonable?
actually make?
Anybody think it isn't reasonable, or if it was a reasonable request to accommodate this young woman?
I think there was, because again, it's discrimination versus anyone else, and if you're not.
Sure. She was very qualified by offense.
Could
Okay,
you
now
afford
the
40
same
grand?
question, fast forward to the University of Montana, where we have 3,500 employees. And I get hit by a truck on my bike going home from work, and I lose my eyesight. Reasonable or not reasonable to accommodate me as a blind accounting professor? You see what we're talking about already? This term is, I mean, obviously, we all want our disabled friends and family and colleagues to have equal access to employment, clearly. But it's so great, and it is just clogged courts, and it's all based upon interpretation by judges. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't want to spend a ton more time on it, but just so many things we talk about. It's like payroll, you just calculate the numbers and write a paycheck. It's like, not really.
Just really quickly, so
Yeah.
it got established in 1993 or
Yeah.
1990. Because it was passed in 1990.
Okay,
I just wanted to.
maybe,
For my notes.
maybe 90, but Clinton was president, and he was elected in 92. Right, Reagan was off in 88. Bush Senior. Clinton was 92 to 2000. I'll have to look at that. I mean, I know that I was, and I know what year I was at the 2 years I was at the pharmaceutical company, so let me look into that.
July 26, 1990, by George H.W. Bush.
Oh, so I stand corrected, 1990. Okay. Well, that doesn't make sense with the whole pharmaceutical company. Oh, no, I worked for the pharmaceutical company 91 and 92, so it had just passed. Okay.
It just says signed into law. Maybe-
Yeah. No, that would be it then. Okay, so 1990. Thank you for the clarification. Yeah, great. See, that's what happens when I don't actually put the date on the slide. Okay, so this was Clinton. This was 96. And this has got a really, really long title, and it's a super complex piece of law. The Federal Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996. Let that roll off your tongue. And what this really did, what we call this is welfare reform. Okay, this was that, of course, a lot of your, some young people. Remember this was a really, really, really big deal, particularly for a Democrat to sign into law pretty sweeping welfare reform, right? So that with the attempt to slow down or eradicate multi-generational dependence on welfare. And it required, that's why it had personal responsibility and work opportunity. It required tons and tons and tons of things, but it also dealt with core issues of poverty. And how that impacts payroll is one of the things that it found, not surprisingly, is that poverty rates are much, much higher in single-parent households. Duh. And one of the problems in single-parent households is that the partner that's not there is not paying his or her child support. And I mean, when I was growing up and in high school and college, I mean, if you wanted to get out from underneath child support, you just went to work in the next state, right? So what they did was create a federal database where if I decided I want to pay child support to my ex-husband, and I go to Idaho and I start my medical practice, my social security number is going to go into a database through OCSE, Office of Child Support Enforcement, and immediately that's going to double check, or what's that called? Cross check with delinquent child support, and my wages are going to be garnished. Right? So, and this works. This was a really simple fix to a pretty huge problem. So what we have to do as payroll processors is when somebody comes to work for us, we've got 20 days by law to report to our respective state agency that, oh, now Gabby works for me and here's your social security number. And then they feed it into the federal database, and then that does the magic thing, like, oh my gosh, she's delinquent on child support in Vermont, right? And her wages are gonna get hit. So this is a huge piece of law. This is just one tiny little caveat of it. It's primarily around welfare reform and poverty eradication. IRCA, 1986, and who was president then again?
Reagan?
Yeah, that was Reagan. And honestly, I was just leaving college and moving to Denmark. And nobody ever talked about immigration really before this era, literally. I mean, it was just such a non-issue. It's just crazy to see in 30 years what it's become as far as a cultural issue. But in 1986, this was passed, called IRCA, Immigration Reform and Control Act, and it was the first time that it became illegal to hire undocumented workers. Okay? I refuse to call people illegals. People aren't, that's just not a noun I will ever use to describe a person. Undocumented workers. And for the first time ever, we had it, and then there was a system to track it. And you guys, when you're young people, of course, your whole life, you filled out an I-9 as the first thing you've done when you come to work, right? You have to prove that you are documented if you're from another country, or that you're a U.S. citizen. And you've got a bunch of ways to do that paperwork-wise, right? Veterans, card, passport, driver's license, etc. And as an employer, boy, howdy, you better be able to produce those documents if they're not called ICE. But if the immigration control authorities come to your organization and ask if you can prove that people are verified to work in your organization, you better be able to prove that they can, because you will have very, very heavy civil penalties if you can't prove that. I'm sure you've all seen the raids that have been occurring in the Southeast, primarily in poultry processing plants, meat processing plants, and, you know, feel as you may about it, but a lot of employers will tell you they can't operate their plants without employing people from other countries because U.S. citizens, they just can't fill positions. So if you're concerned as an employer, you can go into something called E-Verify. You don't have to do this, it's not mandatory. But if you want to cover your butt, which you do, you use the system and put in the Social Security numbers to be provided to you by potential employees, and then it'll run a cross-check. There's a very vibrant, robust market in selling deceased people's Social Security numbers and identities in this country. And obviously, if I'm coming and I want to get a card to work somewhere, I need to produce something, and if I don't have the proper documentation channels, I'm probably going to go into the black market to purchase an identity. And so this kind of protects you as an employer from that. Okay, can you see already how controversial all these topics are? Every single one of them's got some pretty deep connotations. Okay, FMLA, 1993, maybe this is what I was getting mixed up with Michaela. This was, in fact, Clinton. And this I have a personal story about. So before 1993, if you needed to take care of a sick parent or spouse or kid, or you adopted a child, your employer could say, sorry, I mean, you can't accommodate that, just you're fired. And now, since 1993, and it's only for bigger companies, so in Missoula, that's a big company, lots of places, that's a big company, but 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius. So it doesn't cover little mom and pop shops. But what it says is that you are guaranteed 12 weeks of unpaid leave for the birth, adoption, or critical care of a child's foster parent. And it doesn't need to be consecutive. I might take up every Monday and Tuesday, whatever the math works out, till I get to, 12 weeks worth, okay? The way it was originally written was paid leave. And you can imagine what the small business lobby, how they reacted to that. We are one of the only Western countries that have no paid leave for maternity care. You go to Scandinavia, You get a year. Get a year, you don't get your baby. And they've got all sorts of statistical studies that show that down the road, as far as what it costs you societally, right? Like incarceration, juvenile crime, et cetera, postpartum, I mean, the whole slew. We don't get those kinds of things here. So there is no paid leave for maternity care in this country. I mean, you have a baby, but if you're planning on having a baby, but save some money, because you're not gonna get any paid leave. Let's see, employers gotta keep your health care while you're out on FMLA. And we're trying to incent, plenty of employers do personally have paid leave. I mean, like, say my older son works in Silicon Valley, and any of those big firms there, Facebook and Slack and Google, et cetera, and they all have wonderful paid leave maternity programs that they do just as part of the benefit package. And I don't know that these federal tax credits, I have to look at that. I've never actually seen them. I don't do tax returns for anybody that gives paid leave, so I've never seen them, but as a way, a tax credit helps subsidize an employer that's doing the right thing, like getting some paid leave.
It goes from 12 to 26 weeks if you're on active duty. And some states do have paid family leave. Hawaii, California, Delaware. So again, you go to the more progressive states, you're going to see state mandated paid leave. How do they do that? They have higher tax rates. I mean, none of this comes free, right? So that's how that works. Okay, 94, again, this was Clinton, Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. And this basically says, hey, I'm a National Guardsman, or it's basically for folks that are deployed and that aren't career military. So National Guards people, that I've got to have the right to come back to my job that I left while I went to go serve my country, and I get to come back at the same seniority level with the same health care. Reservists, yeah. Is that a big title for all, like, your National Guards folks?
Yeah.
Okay.
National Guard more of a state thing, and reservists is federal thing.
Thanks. Doesn't apply if you're dishonorably discharged. Okay, this is a bit of a, not complex, but let me just spend some time on this. So ERISA was passed in 1974. Let me see if anybody know who was president then. I gotta think about this. I think I know. Who was president?
It was Richard Kennedy, right?
It was Nixon. I think that he resigned before he got impeached in 75. Ford came in 76. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so Nixon was president. And what was happening in 1974, contrary to what soundbite news tells you, our jobs did not leave this country due to one administration or another administration. They've been slowly being eroded since the early 70s. Really, globalization started in the 70s. For the first time, I mean, when I was a little girl, everything was American. Your tools, your car, your wood, your clothes, it just didn't exist to have something that wasn't made in America, right? What a quaint idea. In the 70s, for the first time, I was 10, 11 years old, early 70s, you started hearing about things like Sony and Toyota. Those were the first names I remember that were products that came out of the country. So what started happening in the 70s was this erosion of our manufacturing base, primarily in the Steel Belt, right? Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And companies were panicking, right? I mean, they had a monopoly on things like, steel and car production and television production for, in perpetuity. And all of a sudden there were these products coming in from other countries that were better and cheaper. They were losing market share. So what they do, they started raiding their pension plans for operating cash. Right? So it feels like, holy shit. We're not generating a profit anymore, right? But we've still got these massive complexes, manufacturing plants, and tens of thousands of people. And this too, this might apply to some of your grandparents, it certainly applied to my parents. But, 50 years ago, people worked for one company their whole life. I mean, you went on with John Deere, I'm from South Dakota, you went on with John Deere when you were 18, and you worked there forever, and you retired at 65, and then you got a check, and you lived in the same little, fence with a white house with a white picket fence your whole life. I mean, that's just how it rolled, right? There was you didn't no 401ks or job hopping, right? So when these companies started raising their pension plans, it was a had huge ramifications for our whole economy. And so ERISA came in and said, gosh, we need to do something to legislate the capital flight out of our pension funds. So it really said two things, and these are really two critical things that I'll kind of explain. So the first one is that you can't just put money into, so say I'm John Deere, and every month I come up with a calculation, this is circa 1970, and I have to move $35,000 from my regular account into my pension account, right? So that when you all retire, I can write your checks. It says you can't do that anymore. You have to send that $30,000 to somebody else, a trustee. You can't have access to that money anymore. So that's
Does it have to be federal or could it be private?
No, it can be anybody that you choose that has been designated as a trustee to hold pension funds. It can be an attorney, it can be a trust fund. And then the other thing it says is that also recognizing that there's more mobility now in job forces is that you have got to vest in 3 to 6 years. You've got to start vesting by 3 years and be all the way vested by 6 years. Okay, so the question is, what's vesting? Anybody have a feel for what vesting is?
I know in the union we have to work 5 years before we can get our benefits. That's what they call it, vested.
Okay, so that's a little bit different, but not that significantly. Okay, so what vesting means, the way that a pension plan works, right, is you've got this pot of money and you pay in, right? And the employer pays in, right? Okay. Vesting only applies to the amount that the employer contributes. So if you put any money into like your 401k or your IRA or your pension or your SEP or your Simple or whatever you're in, they can never take your own money. And they can never take the interest that your own money earned. So what vesting pertains to is what part of the pot of money did the employer put in, okay? And what this says is, this is just an example. So this one says, after 2 years of working at the university, I get to keep all my money clearly, and 20% of what the university earned. And after 3 years, 40%, 4 years, 60%, et cetera, goes up every year. But I have to be 100% vested in 6 years. Why do you think that's so significant? Why is that matter? Would you go to work for a company that has a fabulous 401k plan, but you don't vest for 10 years? I mean, young people, you guys, statistics tells us you're going to have 7 to 9 jobs in your life. Professional jobs. I'm not talking about waiting tables at, spend a quarter to get through college. I'm talking about 7 to 9 professional jobs, okay? I've had 3.
I've had 12.
It's significant. It's really a cultural shift. So one of the things you guys want when you go to work is you want to invest immediately in your 401k, right? I don't want to have to stick around 3 or 4 years to get the 30 grand that's in my 401k that my employer put in. I want to know that I've got mobility. In places like Silicon Valley where they're just churning through people, everything vests immediately because they couldn't even get hot young software engineers or whatever to come work for them if they didn't. So pay attention to your vesting plan. So these were the 2 things that ERISA did. Does anybody have questions about vesting?
So is it just when you're terminated or like let's say you quit?
Any situation when you leave the business. So, and also be aware, this is just a little aside, which is a little out of our purview, but really, really important because I've seen this a number of times in my tax practice. If you are leaving, Cognizant here in Missoula, and you're moving to Bozeman to go work for Oracle, and you've got 50 grand in your 401k that you're vested in, you do not call your pension administrator and say, please cut me my check for 50 grand so that I can move that. Why not? Huge tax penalties, unless you're 59 and a half, you're gonna get hit with income tax and a 10% penalty, you're gonna lose a third of that 50 grand. You call up your new pension administrator and say, here's the number of my old pension administrator. You guys need to talk to each other and get my money transferred over. And that is a mistake I've seen happen that cost people 5 and 6 figures. Which is shocking to me. The pension administrator would go, hey, did you know, Michaela, that you're going to lose a third of your $50,000 if you do this? Now, you might need that 50 grand because now you're unemployed, you need that to live. But you might just be making a really dumb mistake. Okay, stringent record keeping. The employer's now got to file this thing called a 5500 annually where they talk about their pension fund and what their vesting requirements are. And then the other thing that the other thing that ERISA did is it provides something, this last bullet, it created the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, and that's a federal agency that if all goes awry, you're supposed to be able to rely on that they insure your pension. But this is a federal agency, and like most federal agencies, they're in the red, so they are really technically insolvent. So I guess and then the last thing I want to say about this is, and this has happened again with my older son. He worked for Tesla for a while, and now he's with Cloud Kitchen and blah, blah, blah. And what they do to incent young people is they give them an okay salary, but then they load them up with stock options that they can only vest in once they've been 20% in 1 year, 40% in 2 years, blah, 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 to keep them there for 5 years, right? But what I keep telling him is, do you really want your income stream and your retirement coming from the same place? Do you? I don't. I don't want my retirement to be in University of Montana bonds. I want my retirement to be in rental property and stocks in China and bonds in Bolivia and, whatever. Diversified. So keep that in the back of your mind too. ACA 2010, who was president? Obama. Now this is getting in an era where some of you are actually alive. It consisted of 2 pieces of legislation. Most people don't know this. The first one was the Healthcare and Education Reconciliation Act, and the second was the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. And it was introduced or incrementally implemented over a 3-year period. It wasn't just dropped into law in one day. When Obama came into office, we had 40 million uninsured people in this country in 2008. Okay, and right now that number is about 7. So there's a million metrics. Did this work or not work? But it was designed to get people insured, and to a significant degree, you could argue that it's done that. Much of that through expanded Medicaid, or Medicare at the state levels. But at any rate, so here's what it was designed to do, bottom 2 bullets. Expand healthcare coverage while increasing benefits and lowering costs. Well, everybody knows that our benefits have certainly increased, and our costs have certainly increased. So yes, everybody has access to WellCare now, right? You can't not get a mammogram because you can't afford it, or get your child immunizations, or get an annual checkup. Dental care is not a piece of this. Okay, in most Western countries, dental care is recognized as crucial core health care. It is not included here. And then it's if you can't, if you don't have access to it through your job, and we'll talk about this in a second, if you're an employer with 50 or more employees, you have to provide. Smaller employees get subsidization from the federal government to provide. But if that's not your situation, like I'm a stay-at-home mom, then you go to your state-based exchange and you try to purchase health insurance through your state exchange, or hopefully you're eligible for Medicaid. And Medicaid is expanded. This is not going to be completely correct, but I think around 28 states have expanded their Medicaid. Montana had a very close call in this last legislature about continuing the expansion, but we've just found that it's been so financially prudent and successful in Montana to bring more people onto our healthcare rolls and keep people healthy for obvious reasons. And it's also provided, I don't know how many jobs, but 5-figure, 10 or 20,000 new jobs in Montana. So it's been a very, very successful thing here. States that are fighting against it traditionally have pretty conservative legislatures, and they don't want to increase Medicaid rolls. So there's a lot of controversy about this.
What happened since Trump come in? Did he roll back a lot of this?
Yeah, it's slowly being piecemeal decimated, piece by piece. The Supreme Court upheld the legality of the ACA as a whole, but as you know, the composition of our Supreme Court has changed. So, I mean, I will definitely tell you, you'll see it taken to the highest court again. And I mean, it's piecemeal being decimated.
I think that tax regime, spinal cord or whatever.
So that was the most onerous part of it for most people, and that was implemented over 3 years. And what it said in the first year is, hey, Jeff, you don't have insurance. You didn't go to your state-based exchange. You don't have, you're not on your parents. You don't qualify for Medicaid. You're going to have to pay, I'm just making the number up, $400 extra on your tax return as a penalty for not being insured. And then the next year, that $400, and again, I'm totally making numbers up, but ballpark, that $400 turns into $1,200. Nothing but spanking you a little harder. Like, you really need to go get insurance. And then in the third year, and it was a big number, like a couple grand. And as a tax preparer, for lots of low middle income people, like people living here making 25, 35 grand a year, they're like, I'm a plumber, I'm a carpenter, I'm a PT, I'm a whatever, and I don't have $800 a month, even on the exchange. Well, what happens then, actually here, what happens then is that you can get subsidies from the federal government. They're called premium credits. If you're eligible, which, I mean, if you're living on 35 grand and you got 4 people in your household, you are. And so, I mean, there's so many permutations of it. But those plans that the government subsidized were bronze, they weren't silver or gold. So you got a really big deductible right out of the chute. But your welfare is covered. I mean, you got a healthy kid, you get your mammogram, your pap smear, your husband gets those, whatever, and the checkup, life's good. You've got a kid that's diabetic or asthmatic or aphasic, maybe not so great.
And if you get any of that, you still have to pay all that premiums and stuff.
So was it perfect? Hardly.
Right. I just know family members who got squeezed out of a lot of things.
And I will say anecdotally, as somebody that's got 50 tax clients and also just is involved with a lot of different levels, income levels, professionally and from a volunteer standpoint in the community, I would say there was an equal amount of stories of people that said ACA saved my life, and oh my God, it, fill in the blank, killed my business, raped me of $5 grand last year. It really was, it was, I would say that when you juggle the balls, it was probably half what I heard.
Kind of what I
If you were uninsured, now you've got insurance. It was kind of a lifesaver. If you've got less than 50 employees, you go to the Small Business Health Options Program. You can get tax credits from the federal government. It is, let me say one more thing about it. The first two things that happened were indisputable, and this is why it will never be completely rolled back. For the first time, you cannot be denied coverage for pre-existing conditions. And if you're any of those things I just said, and I'm diabetic, I'm asthmatic, I've got rheumatoid arthritis, I've had cancer, anything, you could have been denied coverage. So there is no way the
Yeah,
current
they're
administration, huh?
They don't care what covers.
You can't be denied coverage under an insurance plan. They've got to cover you. And that's what happened to guys. The 40 million people who are uninsured, a lot of them have health issues.
So what does that do?
They were lower income and they've never been properly, had proper medical attention. So when a lot of those people came on the health insurance rolls for the first time, it made premiums go up because the general pool was therefore unhealthier, right? And let's be honest, upper middle class people had good health care, they got good teeth, so they're not the ones that generally put a lot of stress on they don't smoke, they have better diets, da. So you see where I'm going with that. So, I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, yeah, so pre-existing conditions, and then the other thing is that you could stay on your kids could stay on your policy till they were 26. And then the third thing was got rid of the lifetime cap. And insurers hated that. And that was very much the thing a lot of people didn't know about. That once you hit $1 million prior to ACA, you hit your lifetime cap, they quit paying. That's like $1 million, it gets up to $1 million. I have a kid with leukemia and go stay in Seattle for 9 months.
Serious conditions.
Yeah, serious conditions, $1 million is nothing, so they got rid of that.
I got a goal,
Okay.
I got a job interview.
Yay!
Are you collecting them, or are we just marking them up and like the homework?
Yeah, I think you're fine.
Okay.
Good luck.
Thank you.
What happened to the insurance companies as far as being able to stay in revenue after that?
They raised their premiums, and if you go look at what the top 10 biggest insurance companies bonused out their CEOs.
So they didn't lose money.
Oh, God, they didn't lose a penny. If anything, the bonuses for their CEOs, and look at some of the numbers, 20 million, 30 million, 50 million.
So would it be accurate to say that the ACA actually enriched the insurance companies? Because
There's a lot of people that feel like, and you're going to hear a lot about this in the next election, so pay attention. Make sure you're signed up to vote and that you pay attention. There were a lot of people that were very unhappy in the progressive community with Obama for continuing to believe that the insurance companies could be part of the solution. Now you will hear a lot of candidates talking about universal health, where you take the insurance companies out of the picture. Yeah. Good luck with that, with the lobby in this country. Okay, these are very, very, very rich and powerful people.
it's also a very complex problem.
Oh, it is a very complex
Just
problem.
doing that, I don't think is going to help. But doing it the other way isn't going to help either. You got to be a middle ground somewhere.
Our healthcare costs in some studies are 400% higher than other industrialized nations. So per capita, it costs each of us high, low income, black, white, rural, urban, it costs 4 times as much to give us help, to deliver health care to us. And yet by almost every metric, we're less healthy. We have more diabetes, we have higher rates of, just everything. Infant mortality, we're 17th in the world. Costa Rica has less infant mortality than we do.
Pretty shocking.
It's pretty shocking, okay? So what's wrong? What is wrong? So it's very complex. It's the hospital system, it's how we compensate our doctors, it's our insurance companies that are bonusing $20 million.
It's also our culture. We're Americans. We don't think.
Well, so, yeah, and that's the other thing. So what do you guys think about an 85-year-old man who's got some pulmonary issues getting his chest cracked for an open heart surgery at $190,000? I'm American, I deserve it, right?
Well, the alternative is, let's just let the guy die because somebody else could use that. And that's not very.
But, yeah, so that's a whole nother medical ethical question, which I'm not qualified to facilitate, but just saying that's a piece of it too.
Right.
Like 90 years old, am I really having major cancer care?
What about 25
Okay.
year olds with a-
Yeah.
You want to change the livers for them.
So
That was interesting that alcoholism is considered a disability.
it is. And it has been for quite a while. The AMA declared it addiction and alcoholism. God, that's been 20 years.
So are other addictions listed? as-
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, state laws, workers' comp. Every state has got to have workers' comp. State disability, that's when something happens to you and you actually off the job and you get disability. So this applies even if the disability, illness, or disease did not arise to employment. And that, we don't have that in Montana, but they definitely have it in some of the more progressive states. Okay, and then just to finish this up, so HR is the human resource system. We know, we've talked about this a lot now. I hope you have a feeling that HR and payroll have to work very closely together. And like I said, a lot of these have migrated out of accounting. The payroll's migrated out of accounting and into HR because of that really deep interconnection. Okay. And back, does anybody remember what the FLSA is?
Family Leave Separation Act?
Fair Labor Standards Act.
Way up.
This, because of its stringent personnel record keeping requirements, boy, you had better have really great job descriptions. You better have a really clear digital or paper trail how, if you guys all apply, why did I choose 3 of you to interview and not the other 6? Is it because you're a guy? Is it because you're Asian? Is it because you're disabled? You know, you better have a matrix that scans the resumes. And then when the 3 of you come in, I would really want a team in there evaluating you in the applications and the interview process, right? Because it's not just like Jess and I are neighbors, so I hired her. I mean, you've just really got to cross your T's and dot your I's. And, okay, this is pretty important. Background check, if you're doing anything, background check, if you're doing your analysis, if you're doing any sort of aptitude testing, if you're doing, not personality testing, with Myers-Briggs, you know, like, what's that called? When they see, like, if you've got a cultural fit with their company, anything like that, I would be calling my employment attorney and asking him or her to evaluate the test I want to give to my prospective employees to make sure it's legal. Because honestly, you guys, employment litigation is a huge risk exposure for companies. And Montana is not a state that's particularly employee-friendly at the courts. It's more employer-friendly, but there's many states where the circuit courts and the judges are very employee-friendly, and you just got to be very careful. And okay, and this talks about all the ways to prevent lawsuits. And then the last thing I want to talk about is reference inquiries. So if you guys work for me and then you leave, and then a prospective employer calls and goes, hey, how did Laurel do when she worked for you? What am I going to say?
But you have to just get statistics. You should give a character
I'm going to
reference.
verify dates of employment.
Yeah.
I don't want to give any confidential data away. I don't want to say anything that's remotely subjective. I don't want to indicate by the tone of my voice whether I liked Laurel or not. I certainly don't talk about why she left employment with my firm. I give dates of employment. Same thing holds with you guys. When somebody calls me a year later, it's like, oh, you know, Steve was in your class. You know, what'd you think of him? Yes, he was in fact in my class. I can't talk about Steve's attendance. I can't talk about his grades. I can't talk about his performance.
You can be sued for that?
Oh, hell yeah. Character defamation. I can tell you our lead counsel at the university, our lead attorney is a woman named Lucy France, and she comes over every fall and every spring at our welcome back and is like, yeah, don't touch your students inappropriately. Don't say anything about them to anybody else. It's like, okay, thank you for reinforcing that. It's just a really potential area of risk. Okay, so obviously we didn't get to the homework. We'll do that first thing on Wednesday. And I will tell you, be prepared next Friday for a quiz on all these acronyms. FLSA, OASDI, FMLA, blah, blah, blah. Okay. See you on Wednesday. Have a great 3-day weekend. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you do.